Hi everyone, welcome to today's Masterclass. I'm Niall McGee, I'm the Operations Performance Manager here at CoolPlanet. I work on CoolPlanetOS and I also work on the Business Intelligence unit looking at all of the data of our internal systems, which relates quite closely to what we're going to talk about today, which is Masterclass is going to focus on the design process from start to finish of delivering decarbonisation solutions that reduce energy, increase efficiency and deliver substantial carbon savings. But we're going to talk about it from the perspective largely of how we can use data to drive all of this and the data that we collect with the CoolPlanetOS system. We're going to hear about some reference projects from across manufacturing sectors to see what works and what doesn't work when it comes to approaching decarbonisation. As well as that, we're going to look at who this masterclass is aimed at, which would be the likes of plant managers, engineering managers, sustainability managers, and professionals working in areas such as process engineering, emissions compliance, manufacturing, asset management, and sustainability. We're going to learn a couple of things today, but largely we're going to focus on how the availability of data and the platform to manage the same is key to ensuring that there's a successful outcome in the design and project delivery phase, which is really what we're trying to get to is how we can ensure that projects we're going to complete are going to be effective and going to be worth doing. We're going to look at how we can supplement the existing data with additional data points through the design and delivery of decarbonisation solution and how that's going to lead to ongoing energy monitoring and reporting. And finally, how tools such as CoolPlanetOS can manage data and manage decarbonisation solutions as they evolve from being ideas, moving through the design process and subsequently actually being realised. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to David Collins, my colleague, who has previously led a masterclass, and he'll just remind you a little bit about what that topic was because it's going to relate to what we talk about today.
Yeah, thanks, Niall. My name is David Collins. I'm engineering manager at CoolPlanet. So as Niall said, I suppose we're building on a previous masterclass that myself and my colleague Jason Gardner, our thermal and cogen SME, actually delivered last June in the middle of COVID. What we talked about that day was, I suppose, the engineering process for delivering successful decarbonisation projects. So as Niall said there, we're going to look at that same kind of topic and just building it around how introducing data and the quality of that data can really help enhance that process even further. Mm-hmm. So just to give a quick recap on what Jason and I kind of summarised this time last year, we kind of set out a number of kind of key success criteria for delivering decarbonisation projects, and almost top of the list every time is around engagement. So I mean, that's getting buy-in from the outset, from corporate, from management, from technical operations teams on the ground, because again, everyone has their part to play in successful decarbonisation projects. Another aspect was about the scheduling. So again, you have to give yourself enough time to actually develop out and deliver these projects right from audit stage through subsequent stages of engineering, and then through actually the project delivery and commissioning phase as well. So we'll remind ourselves a bit about that. A couple of other things more so around the financing, grant assistance programs. There's lots out there depending on which country you're based in, but getting applications in early, being conscious of when grant applications are due, when they'll be awarded, and how that ties in with your own availability of capex and cash flows during the project is also key to plan out.
I'm assuming having the data behind those grant applications makes it much easier being able to verify it against potential savings, where we are actually going to achieve them and when they'll be achieved.
Absolutely. I mean that plays into the measurement and verification process as well. But when you're putting together a successful grant application, the associated bodies want to make sure that it's built on solid data. Right, there's going to be some assumptions at early audit stage, but again, as those develop through the engineering, you want those to be less and less. But that strong data set at the outset, for sure, Niall, is definitely important. Mm-hmm. So grants along with financial year planning, because again, not all financial years run January to December. There's going to be overlap into calendar years or across calendar years. So being aware of what the criteria is for getting a project approved. It's always going to be competing with other projects, other operational projects, other infrastructure projects. So making sure everyone's aware of what the criteria is to get this across the line. There might be a lot what we're seeing nowadays with multinationals is they're giving an extra weighting for projects that deliver significant decarbonisation results, because ultimately they want to work towards their goals. A few other criteria then: experienced energy services company. Again, depending on the type of application or type of industry, be it commercial, industrial, pharmaceutical, food and beverage, having a partner that's experienced in delivering decarbonisation projects, a suitable experienced partner is key. Planning around annual shutdowns as well, especially when you might be introducing an alternative energy system such as a new heating network driven off a heat pump. Planning out those tie-ins around your annual shutdowns for both mechanical and electrical tie-ins is something to be aware of as well. Building that in with major equipment lead times also. You mentioned it already, preparing your data set for the energy services company. So in the lead into an audit, the more data and the quality of that data that's available, we'll touch on that a bit more. Having that ready to hand over to energy services companies so they can hit the ground running in terms of looking at potential solutions. And then just the final point that we wrapped up on this time last year was just about internal budgeting. It's not just the cost of delivering the decarbonisation solution once it gets approved. There's lead-ins to that for front-end engineering design, and even before that again for energy audits with your energy services company of choice. Some of that spend may need to go early doors onto an energy management system or decarbonisation management platform to start gathering that data. So again, it's looking at that process from start to finish in terms of from when you identify the solution through to when the solution's realised.
I guess that's becoming more and more important as well. Having that early investment in an energy management platform system gets you a much shorter lead time to doing a project because you actually can back it up with numbers beforehand, which can reduce the overall cost of a project because you're not waiting on answers.
Again, we're working with a couple of clients here in Ireland. We work with clients around the world, but there's a couple of large companies here in Ireland who are long-standing clients of ours on our energy management system, CoolPlanetOS, which is now looking at planning out decarbonisation opportunities towards their long-term decarbonisation goals. But they had solid data sets that in the past 18 months, we've been able to use, we've been able to interpret with very little assumptions having to be made that can look at identifying a solution, sizing equipment, sizing new equipment such as heat exchangers, circulation pumps, etc., and progressing on with the design of those, rather than, in some cases, we come up against it as well, an absence of data. So you could say they're 12 months ahead of best case of where somebody else could be in that curve in terms of starting off their decarbonisation journey.
If we've got goals of 2025 and 2030, those years are rapidly approaching if you have to spend a full year gathering data beyond what you already have. Absolutely.
And I mean, multinationals these days, they're setting their budgets 6 months in advance for the year ahead. So you need to be ready to get your projects in. So thinking back through the steps in the process, you need to have your a strong data set available, and an energy management platform like CoolPlanetOS can help you manage that data.
Perfect. Thanks, David. I think we looked at previously also the kind of typical project development. So it was like a life cycle that we got through. And if you want to look into detail, please feel free to go back to that other masterclass. It was quite interesting. But one of the things that came up what comes up with our customers having these ideas with the data set is kind of tracking the ideas. And quite often we've seen it where people have a list of a spreadsheet and these are things I suggest. But what's quite useful on particularly our platform is that users can just create ideas of where they think there might be projects. And then they might not have time to put into it now, but later on they'll sit down and they'll review it. So how we manage that is we have what we call the opportunities register. And it's quite useful for this, and also we'll see later on for ISO 50001 tracking. But with our opportunity register, essentially a user can come in and say, well, we've got this data, I've got an idea for what we'll do with it. Let's create let's say I've got an example here with a customer who was looking at solar, a solar project. They wanted to put about 630 kilowatt panels onto the system. So logged it as an idea. And then it was literally just 2 or 3 bullet points. I think we should install solar on our roof. We've got a large amount of space. Let's just list a few things we think we might need to look at. Okay, we need to look at, do we want battery storage along with that? What kind of planning are we going to need? Put that idea in with maybe an estimate of financials. And then when they have time to come and actually plan it out, they've gone away and they've built a dashboard on it, which we've fed in the fuel mix for the country, and then we look at how much solar is feeding into the grid, and then that's a good estimation of what our solar is going to be like. We can also do it more localized and look at the illumination in your specific area. But in this case, we looked at just the grid balance and said, okay, well, when the grid is producing solar as a percentage of the total solar produced over the year on any given day, given our size install, what would it look like? So in this case, we reckon with a 630 kilowatt install, we could pretty much feed 98% of the solar for the year. Now it's a blend between, it'll be exporting at times and importing, so that's where we want to look at, is a battery going to be suitable? But we built these dashboards to demonstrate, okay, this is going to be the energy cost without the project occurring, this is going to be the savings for that time period. If we do the project, how much are we spending on import in that time? And we can map it over a year, 2 years, and kind of see roughly what we expect our energy savings to be, which helps feed into then on the opportunity register the payback time. So when we start to get to the stage, and in this case we've actually gone and got some quotes from a customer, from a civils company and a solar contractor, which includes the details around how much it's going to cost. When we feed that together back in, it's telling us what our payback's going to be, and it's irrefutable evidence of that. It's not just us putting a finger in the wind. We actually have the data to back it up and show that this is how much it's going to cost. And are we happy enough to sign off on that project? We'll take this through the next stage from, it's no longer just an idea, it's now a qualified idea, and we'll say, okay, we verified it, and then once we're happy with that, if we go ahead with it, we'll move it to in progress, or we could say that we've realized that savings. So it's a pretty useful tool to track. You could have hundreds of different ideas of small projects, and some of them might not be viable right now because it might be too expensive, or there might not be enough savings in it. But in a year's, 2 years, as you've discussed already, in a year's time, we could come back to it and say, okay, now it's viable because the cost of energy's gone up, or we've signed up to a target carbon reduction as a company. There's pressure coming from a board level or from a shareholder level to reduce our carbon. Let's do that.
It's what you just described there around that solar opportunity. It's one opportunity. When we're doing, I suppose, audits at the start of that project development process you're referring to for our clients, there could be 20, 30, 40 different audits or different solutions that we identify during an audit of a client's plant. So as you said, I think the days of a static Excel sheet for managing those opportunities are long gone now. You need a centralized platform. You need it backed up by a live feed of data as well, especially around, we'll get to it around projects that are realized, so that you can actually measure and verify those savings. But you're right, you need a tool, and its requirement is 50,001 to track each of those solutions. Some of them will be parked at the end of the audit. Inevitably 2 or 3 might be picked to move forward into the next phase of engineering, and then subsequently on to implementation. But again, you're right, we see it often that solutions that were identified during an audit get parked. The ones with maybe a priority payback are prioritized and delivered on, but then those other solutions are refreshed, and maybe it's because at the time it didn't have as much of an attractive payback in terms of cost, but actually still had a very decent carbon savings. And we're seeing that a lot now these days, that the criteria is starting to shift somewhat away from number of years payback based on cost savings. The tons of carbon saved from an opportunity is coming more to the fore. So
I guess the increasing cost of carbon tax adds to that, and then also emissions agreements that companies have committed to, where you're going to be fined heavily if you don't meet them at some point. One of the points that we've mentioned a couple of times is the accuracy of the data, and how important that is. So to plan our projects and to look at future savings, one of the important things for us to do is quite often we'll build models. Those models we based off of real life performance. So we can't know exactly how the same piece of plant is going to operate in your plant versus another plant, because your control scenarios are quite different. But what we can do is we can take those controls that you have in place at the moment and apply and build a model to predict it. A lot of you people that are watching today may already be familiar with it. The idea of regression modelling, where we take multiple variables put them into a calculation, and then we can understand, we know what the weather's going to be like tomorrow. We know what our certain operating parameters are going to be, and within that we can predict what our energy usage is. So within an energy management platform, what we can do is we can build these workbenches and dashboards, workbooks and dashboards, and we can demonstrate, what is our total compressor energy in this case going to be like, given a certain situation. If we're going to have to produce a specific amount of air, well, what is the energy usage going to be like for that? So being able to understand that is critical to not just the design stage of the project, but also the measurement and verification stage. So we want to make sure that we're speccing the right size equipment, the right size filters, the right size pipes, and we can't do that if we don't have good, accurate information to start with. So having a good year, 2 years worth of knowledge, worth of data can help with that. And one of the things we touched on previously was how do we get additional data in. So it's great if we do have the energy management platform in place. It's not the end of the world if we don't. If you do also have that in a spreadsheet or in some sort of other recordings, there's tools available to us, such as a manual data import tool, where if you have this documented, and a lot of the time the process controls you will have documented either through control situations, you'll have manual logging on equipment as to when somebody's pressed what buttons, or from lab testing of some of your materials, your raw materials went in. Like you might know, in the case of biomass, you might have the moisture content of some of the material that went into that boiler, so you can start to understand the process controls around your biomass boiler. Or you might have the material quality, your ingredients recipe. I'm thinking of a glass manufacturing plant that we work with quite closely, where we've got the content of the magnesium, the borax, and the recycled material, what percentages of them go into each different batch. So we can load, if we have that manual data, we can load it into the system really quite easily, and then feed those into the models. So just because we didn't have a meter isn't the end of the world, but we can join it together with the information we do have in the system, which is really, really quite helpful.
I think just on that, a recent good example, but the more data you have, as you were saying there, for building those regression models to establish a baseline and predict energy usage before and after maybe a solution is implemented is kind of key. So you think in its most basic form, a site might have monthly energy bills, electricity and gas bills that come in maybe a week, 1 to 2 weeks after month end, and they might have a monthly production figure as well. So flip that around with a live data stream where you can bring that right back to hourly data from a production system. Bringing it back from your mains electricity meter or sub meters back into an EMS, where you can actually build more those regression models with a lot more data sets and get a lot more accurate in terms of where the predicted energy might be. We've seen that recently with a couple of sites, and I suppose that's where the power of a energy management system such as CoolPlanetOS can really help on that.
I think one of the points I wanted to touch on, particularly around the regression models as well, it highlights the importance of the accuracy of that data. So it's quite important that the meters we do have are validated, checked, because when we talk about regression modeling, a lot of the time we bring in to play a variable that might be a multiplier of 5-10 times a specific variable. So if that variable is already out by 10%, and then you're multiplying it by 10, you're out 100 times, or you're out a full effort. So it is quite important that we are considered in our approach and our monitoring to make sure that the data is valid before a multiplier adds on another realm of variance. So that's one thing that I would always say people need to be considerate about when they are looking at their energy monitoring. So at the start, just check, is everything balanced?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Like, definitely the regression models, we're seeing them a lot more both at audit stage when you're trying to find those correlations, and then, as I said, predict out energy usage. But then after you get the EMS up and running, there's so many different combinations of regression models that can be built, as you said, maybe around a piece of kit such as a refridge system, or at site level as well versus main production.
Great. So we've had this idea of, we've taken existing data on the site, we've thought of some ideas for projects we can do. You've gone in, you've analysed the data to come up with a design. to qualify that idea. You've a couple of stages. You've got your front end engineering on it, your detailed design.
Yeah.
And then we've discussed operating an M&V on top of that and verifying that our savings are being achieved.
Yeah.
Applying all of that back to our opportunity register, one key thing that we are quite excited about looking at and can help with the whole overall process on a higher, kind of more macro level is what are our ultimate goals as a company? Is it achieving carbon savings or is it achieving monetary savings? One of the tools that's really quite powerful and allows us to do that is the glide path. If we take a look at the glide path for that commercial building that I discussed, we can see how it works. So essentially, what we do is we key in a baseline year and we say, this is going to be what our carbon emissions are at the moment.
Okay.
We can set in, this is when I need to achieve it by and what my reductions are going to be. But the big question there is, the missing value is, how do we get there? Okay, we have a start point, we have a destination. What's the journey? So each of those opportunities that we've registered, we have an estimation of real world savings, whether it's monetary or carbon. And the glide path then will actually show us a stepped change. So in here we can see each little light bulb and numbers in a number of opportunities. And if they are to be achieved by a specific date, we can see the steps of stairs happening. And we can see, well, we desperately need this solar to happen because it's going to equate to 50% of our planned savings opportunities. If we achieve that by, in this case, July 2026, well, then we're halfway there. And then we've got our goal down here at the bottom. We can see what's the chasm, what's missing, how many more opportunities do we need to find?
Yeah.
And that can really help, I guess, when you're looking for CapEx, when you're looking for budget internally. You can say, yes, it's a large amount of money, but this is how much more we need to achieve.
Yeah.
Always being able to go back and say, okay, we've done a great job. We're not quite there yet. This is what else we need to do. And I guess I'd suggest to a lot of people, you've touched on already, we can have 25, 30 different solutions there. It's like, okay, in an ideal world, we want to do them all, but we have to prioritize them. So which is going to give us the biggest impact on our goal?
And the important thing about that is, as you were saying, you map out when your solutions will start delivering savings, but what the tool can also do and what you need to be conscious of as well is actually, well, when do I need to start planning for these? They all might have been identified during that initial audit, but as I said previously, some of them would have progressed at a different rate than others. But if you have front-end design on something that's needs to be generating savings in July 26, you said, you need to take account of the installation time, the lead time on that equipment.
The lead times, we've all been familiar with the lead times. The last couple of years have just gone through the roof. People don't have the staff to build equipment. They don't have the materials. They're getting stuck in canals, and people still being delayed by the knock-on effect that has had several years later. So,
absolutely, yeah.
We do need to be thinking that far ahead. I know it's a struggle for some people. You have the day-to-day to worry about and keep my plant running today, but you also do need to zoom out and look at the macro view and say, well, where are we going to be in 5 years? Where are we going to be in 10 years?
Yeah.
The day-to-day operations is 100% critical. Completely understand that, but we do have to start thinking about how we're going to get there, because the future crops up pretty quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, again, as you were saying, that 6-month installation on site might be an 18-month project process by the time, as we're going back to the start about your grant applications, your financial year planning, your procurement, which you touched on, the availability of contractors, annual shutdowns. So again, it needs to be looked at from a holistic point of view. But then imagine you have 5 or 6 opportunities in that building. They need to be layered on top of one another. And then imagine that you've got 10 buildings in that portfolio. So again, you need to, I suppose, sometimes kind of step back and see actually where this all needs to be visualized and how this is going to get you towards your 2030 or 2050 target. And I think the glide path is a great tool to do that.
Cool. One last area I just want to touch on that we kind of mentioned quite briefly was the 5001, 50001 alignment. So how all of these tools can kind of work together to help us to achieve that. So a lot of people may or may not already be familiar with the 50001 process, and some of you may already be certified, which is fantastic. The problem with certification is you need to get recertified every year, or every couple of years. So it's quite important to be able to reproduce things and also constantly adjust your targets. It's like, okay, we've achieved it. How much more can we save? How much more can we save? How much more can we save? Carbon reduction is a never-ending battle. There's always going to be more things creeping in, and as everyone knows, plant performance is constantly changing. Equipment ages, degrades, needs to be replaced with time. So having the register there is one fantastic point of view. The other thing is to make sure that the projects that we've done continue to deliver savings and continue to reach those targets. And a few things that an EMS can do to benefit that is bring in things like the watchers and tasks, and put in place alerts to say, this is how my plant should operate. If it's operating beyond that, let me know. And they become essentially non-conformance registers and a list of this is when things didn't operate as planned. And that's also can be massive help to your savings dashboards, and where you're showing your NV, and actually we can say, well, savings have degraded in the last 3 months or last 3 weeks or week, and then you can match it up with, well, we put in place an alert to say this is how it should be operating, and they've been triggering, so we know why the savings have dropped off, because somebody switched into manual override, or because we've had an exceptionally wet day or dry day, or some sort of impact, which should be taken care of with the regression modelling. But there's been some parameter change that has caused it, or maybe the feedstock we've been buying off a new supplier in the last week isn't quite as good as the feedstock we've had last month. But they should be helped to identify those and maintain those project savings. Or in fact, they might just highlight, okay, there's a strainer that needs to be rinsed out because it's clogged up and we're having steam issues. So I think we've covered pretty much everything we've wanted to look at today. Dave, thanks a million for your time again. You've been given wonderful knowledge to our Masterclasses series. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to close on, or...
Yeah, I think it's just between last year's Masterclass, it's just that key success criteria that we Jason and I talked about at the time. I think we've covered a lot of that again today, but it is so important when you're planning out these solutions. Like, there still is time. People are panicking. 2025, 2030, 2050. There's time to get things right. We see it a lot. There's different levels of data available. I suppose what we've highlighted today is having that quality data available can really help accelerate that decarbonisation process. But that's not to say that for anyone who's maybe feels they're a bit behind that, there's still not lots of opportunity and low-hanging fruit to go after early doors in the process. So that success criteria, that collaboration across the teams, that planning for the projects, both financially and technically with your operations team around shutdowns, the grant programs, I think there's just a lot there to take in.
I think just to summarize as well, two things that I would not or would help or not put people off. Just because you might not have a platform in place already, you said it's not too late. We can start with a much more light touch and start with your ideas, get those ideas into a register, figure out where we might want to achieve things, and then that can help design your metering if you don't have one yet. If you do have one, great, you're ahead of the curve. If you don't have one, it's not the end of the world. Start with our ideas and opportunities and build on that. And then the other thing I would say is what you've mentioned in a way is reach out to us. We've got a team of experts in multiple different areas, and we're more than willing to help. So if you want to get in contact via email, all the details will be there, and looking forward to hearing from you all.
Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, everyone.